G2, because I'm with you, Maniac. I actually think this is an example of where you can tell who actually loves analysis for the sake of analysis, or who just wants like narratives and like to, you know, essentially to. Here's my like boomer way of envisioning the nephews, the kids who have all these opinions, Maniac. They're just like delinquent teens that like after the game, when like Zemu has a bad game, they just put like Zemu equals fraud in like your spray paint on the outside of the stadium, if you know what I mean. Like that's all they're doing. You know, it's not like a big philosophical statement. There's not a manifesto attached. There's not a lot of deep thoughts. It's sort of just a statement in many ways, Maniac, and maybe not the product of the most enlightened mind. So what I would say is this: I noticed everyone else took it the other way. They took this event as like super conclusive, and it's just, you know, it shows that like Hooxi's a total fraud. He's not even necessary. NiKo's actually already the best in-game leader. Just nailed it already. Stewie 2K should probably play in G2. Like, holy fuck! Like, I'm with you, Eniac. Like, it's the other way around. It actually asks more questions and gives answers. That's what I thought was awesome. Like, if you ever like talking about like roster construction and all the problems G2's had, this is like the spice. This is like a fucking someone just put fucking petrol on the fire. It was the flame was starting to go out because we all thought, yeah, there's not enough firepower, literally in that case. And then like this just fucking made the whole, like a million potential questions. So where do you want to start? What was the most tasty thing about this initially to you?
Oh, holy shit. Well, the first thing that I had in mind when I saw G2 picking up some steam is that I thought, if I was Hooxi right now, how would I feel? And I think this is a question that's very easy to just meme about and trying to play it cool, because you can just say, you know what, these are my teammates. I wish them good. I wish them all the best all the time. And sure, I imagine there's a part of you that probably thinks that. Also, that's probably what society wants you to think anyway. That's like the good way to go about it. But if you think about the way G2 actually won, I think this is concerning for him. It is extremely concerning for two reasons. And all of the comments I'm about to make are not statements about how he was or he is doing in G2. It's about how that group was doing without him. And it's concerning for two reasons. First of all, I actually do think that the decisions that G2 and or NiKo actually made in money time were very good decisions. I think the way they were able to like sort of find solutions, slow down the game when they needed to against Vitality, then come in with a couple of like quick hits, which obviously they probably didn't even have like the best executes in the world, because you could see we were even trolling about Stewie just trying to find his like angle for the smoke, and then the smoke is missed twice. So this was far from being like ready, but just by playing sort of fundamentally correct Counter-Strike and making good decisions and good reads, that G2 team actually looked solid as hell on the T side too. Like this was not, I didn't think it was one-sided. I didn't think it was gamble-based. I didn't think it was like irreplicable. But the matter of the fact is they've had a bunch of very long games, a bunch of 3 mappers all the way in Dallas. And that will obviously test what you're made of on the T side. It's not just that they were styling 13-3 on people. And no, that's not what happened. Absolutely not. So concerning, because tactically speaking, I think NiKo made a pretty decent case, or like his ability to make decisions, and whoever was coming in with ideas as well, they made a pretty good case. Concerning because NiKo individually, out of fucking nowhere, has a once again MVP conversation worthy performance, which I'm just gonna go ahead and say never happened in CS2. Like he was always good. He was always very good, but now in Dallas he was excellent. Like he actually was excellent. I think like in the HLTV list, he's probably like the second EVP. So it's like Monacy MVP. Zai was the first EVP, and then NiKo is right behind it in terms of like hierarchy, how they built it. So a very strong EVP event from NiKo. Apparently not tethered by the fact that he had to at times just like come up with ideas and like micromanage just a little bit. And I was watching them, I was listening to them on the concourse, and he was quite vocal as well. It's not like he was just saying, okay guys, let's do the bluebird strategy, and then he was shutting up. Like no, he was like a lot of like micromanaging and back and forth. So concerning because he apparently is capable of doing that, and he will frag. And finally, lastly, whatever they were naming this atmosphere shift when Stewie came in, like, oh, we have good vibes and we are enjoying the moment right now, and we're all staying positive and we believe in each other and we enjoyed ourselves. What if they start thinking, why didn't we have it before? Why didn't we have that before with the actual lineup that is? And I think this can be very pernicious now, because as it was happening in Dallas, nobody came to Dallas thinking, oh, this is going to be a great application for Stewie and see if he stays in G2. Like, this was never the question. And I don't think it even is the question now. But when you have such a result and you were able to elevate your game that much and be that strong, you would kind of not be doing your due diligence if you weren't thinking about it.
You got to consider it, yeah.
Exactly. You would just at least consider, hey, how did we end up being so strong? And what does that tell us about where we were before? And what are the logical conclusions to that? So I do think that now, if that wasn't already the case, they might be the best buds in the world. I do think Hooxi's on thin ice. I think that result undermined him. It undermined him a lot. And I would not wish to be in his position. I think it would be hella uncomfortable right now.
Sure. First of all, when you said, what did he think? Right, I actually addressed this on that Feed the Trolls thing I did with Tech Girl, right? My joke went like this, which is like, look, even though players will always... Look, here's the problem. It's not that like players think one thing or another. Like we can all have multiple thoughts. We can be ambivalent. We can have two feelings at once sometimes, right? So the problem is, part of you, like, is Hooxi the teammate? And they're all people you care about and you want to see them succeed. And by the way, you've been fighting so that this team can win a championship all this time. So whether you're there or not, you'd want them to win in a way, but that's also a certain part of you, and that's definitely more of the public side of you, I would say. Because all I'll say is, one thing I always enjoyed was back in the day, at least when they retire, most pro players in interviews will admit, like, oh yeah, I would say, like the joke is, if you were on North back in the day, when you get eliminated, you're supposed to go, well, I hope Australis wins the tournament, I'll be cheering for them. But the joke is, you really just think like, I definitely hope they don't win the fucking tournament, because I want to be the best Danish team. I don't want them to keep fucking winning while I'm out the tournament. And, you know, maybe then also, maybe one of them does bad and then they get kicked and I get to join. There's a million reasons why you should. And so part of you, just for human nature, guys, there's a part, like, my joke went like this, Maniac. I actually bet that Hooxi, because he seems so earnest, I bet he was for real, never even having any dark or cynical thoughts right up until the final. But I'll bet once it was 1-1, he just sort of thought, that's enough now, guys. Just lose. Like, you know, listen, finals is great. Thank you, Stewie 2K. Great job. You know, you've done a lot. But one, can you guys just chill? And two, Ziwu, come on, mate. Like, can we get this done? Like, you know, because you're right. The second that G2 wins that tournament, here's one of the first things I also agree. This actually low key. What's funny is, this is why I want to stress what I said earlier, though. It's not the, like, Hooxi is shit thing that is now brought up. Like, in reality, he hasn't changed anything about Hooxi. Hooxi's still Hooxi. But the problem you have, I actually agree, is from the G2 players, mate. Because before now, right, let's say you lost a tournament with Hooxi. It's obviously happened many times. They've made a final since they did the JKS with Nexus swap, right? When you lose one of those tournaments, luckily, actually, the thing that plays in Hooxi's favour is pro players aren't actually, this might shock a casual fan, pro players very rarely actually do go like, hey, what the fuck were those strats and calls? Like, most pro players think things like, oh, you missed your flash, or I should have shot this guy, or fuck, what was I doing that 1v1? They think of like simple moments in the game they remember, like, oh, you know, we lost to Deagles when we had a full buy at the end of the game and we could have just steamrolled them. That's the sort of thing they'll normally blame. But in this, so they're never actually going to sit around, Maniac, and go, yeah, it was a close game. I wonder how, like, Shuhei would have called that instead of Hooxi. They're not sitting around doing that. But what's mad is, because they now have actually, through a very weird set of circumstances, being able to win a tournament with NiKo IGLing, who crucially isn't Stewie 2K. This would be so different if it was Stewie 2K had called. And the question was, do we want, like, you know, potentially washed Stewie 2K? It wasn't played in years, and that looks like a miracle tournament. Or, because the problem now is, if your choices swap to NiKo's IGL, which would be the end of Hooxi in the team, just logically. If that's your choice, well, he's already there, and you don't even have to make that, so there's not even any pressure. So it means at any moment now, from this event onwards, you can stop and think after a loss of Hooxi, like, I kind of felt better when NiKo called that game. You could just have that thought, and if you have that thought, that is the most, I'm with you, it's the most corrosive thought, not least because they win this event with no pressure, and Stewie 2K wasn't even that great, by the way. He was all right. Essentially, it's like, I actually thought people framed it well on Twitter. It's like, his strength, basically, you can go and look it up. He had like a 35% opening kill attempt, guys. Like, even Hooxi doesn't debate that much. Like, that's ridiculous. If you go look at the event, I can summarize it very simply. NiKo's opening kill attempts go way down, and Stewie 2K essentially does what a good stand-in who isn't a top player should do, which is you just be totally selfless. Like, you're literally the bait every time, but you do it in a good way. Like I said, I actually think his strength was he knows how to be baited, and he did a fucking great job doing it. But I'm with you. If I'm those players, it's not just like, because that whole discussion would be the same for them. Like, who do we get instead of Hooxi? Well, Carrigan isn't coming through that door. You know what? Fuck, can we even get Snarpeter's kid? You can't. Instead, the real question now actually is, for real, like, if NiKo really wants to do that role, It's kind of like we can do that tomorrow, right? Because I'm with you, Maniac. Here's what I'll give Hooxi the credit for. I don't think you can say he had nothing to do with this, because I doubt they threw their whole playbook in the bin. I imagine they were running some things that he worked on before. But the problem is this, Maniac. Hooxi was never really famous for iconic strats. And in fact, people even said he was supposed to be good at like working with star players. Well, I have to tell you, that aspect of just calling on the fly, NiKo looked really good at, guys. I've got to say. It's actually the thing I even used to think back in FaZe he was really good at anyway. Remember, he used to frag out always. It never affected his game. And in fact, they used to be pretty good. Like, if people don't know, they've won something like, I think they won like 3 events in FaZe when he was IGL or something like that. Someone said it on Reddit. Like, he's actually won quite a few tournaments, and he's had his star players. So I don't even hate the idea if NiKo wants to do it, he could do it. But it definitely adds like a little bit of extra spice we never had in this conversation before. Because as we said before, it was always Hooxi out, and then you're trying to go, is it Shuhei? Is it Snap? You know, it's always that one. Whereas I'm with you. This is actually, I'm not against this idea. It doesn't have to happen, but I think it's interesting. Where are you at on it?
The only thought that I currently have that really just jumped at me right now is when Electronic went from being a player to leader in Na'Vi, the first event he had, he destroyed everyone, everything. I don't know if you remember, that was Lisbon at the time. He had like monstrous rating. He wrecked everybody, and then that left me thinking, oh my God, they figured it out. This is great. I don't think Electronic survived from the honeymoon period to, okay, let's actually get down to the nitty gritty. Let's start working on that shit. Let's deal with all of the fucking responsibilities that the leader has to be on a day-to-day basis. I don't think he survived that. So now we have to make the assumption that what happened to NiKo's individual level is something that can maintain. That is a very big assumption. But if that assumption is true, because I mean, the problem is the same way we knew how strong Electronic was, there is no way to deny that it didn't work out when he was the IGL and he suffered from it massively. So do I decide to say that, okay, this is going to be a different story now with NiKo, we're not going to follow the same pattern, or do I say we have to be mindful of it? Let's just be hopeful. Let's be optimistic and hopeful for the sake of the conversation. NiKo's level can maintain at a very, very high level, arguably higher than he ever was in CS2. The other problem that you have if you're Hooxi now is that you're not competing with the pool of IGLs anymore. Like any stronger anchor, selfless player out there will come for your spot. And there are plenty of people who would absolutely kill just to be the secondary anchor of G2 and be NiKo's bait in some of these situations. And all you need is you just have to have someone that's slightly better for people to feel like it's an upgrade. You need to have someone who's maybe coming in with very little expectations, doesn't take a whole lot of space, has a good level. Like, it's like the list of candidates. I feel like if we were going down there, like this could be like a really big pool of people who could contend for that position, and which is a much, much bigger pool than just say, okay, what kind of IGL are we now going to bring to G2, which like all of the really strong profiles are either taken, or you have to make a massive gamble and hope that you've found the new generation IGL, the next Shuhei or the next Kixen or something, and you just found one that's like a diamond in the rough, which is not easy at all. So now, if NiKo considers becoming an IGL, then suddenly your rivals, as if you're Hooxi, they outnumber you. And I think we can both agree that, as you said, if NiKo decides to be an IGL, which I hope is not going to be a decision made just based on
of course, yes.
the euphoria of Dallas. I think this is something that has to be thought through.
Sure.
But if this is the conclusion, Hooxi's done. You're not surviving. You're not surviving in that G2 in that scenario. So yeah, that's why I'm saying he's probably in a bit of a pickle of a situation right now. We are making a whole lot of hypotheses. We don't know how NiKo is feeling about it, how G2 is feeling about it, but there's reason for concern.
I mean, I'll even add in as well, the other reason why I bring this up is I feel like maybe people have conflated two topics, because obviously the famous thing about NiKo is he's done everything he wanted. Like, he's been the IGL, but he's also AWP'd before, if you remember. And I was always really against him AWPing, a bit like I was against Shock's AWPing, right? Same reason why, by the way. They can both AWP, definitely. Like, they have some of the craziest highlights ever, both of them. It's just that when you're as good as they are with the rifle, like, you just think, like, mate, just be more versatile. Like, you'll win more clutches, you know. You can move around the map more safely. People don't have to put all the resource into you. Like, there's all these good reasons. So the difference is, I was much more against NiKo being the primary AWP, if you remember that Kenny S angle when he first came in G2. I was more against that than the IGL one. The IGL one was more just the idea of, like, Fizz wasn't just the top team when he IGL'd. That's all. Like, it's so many years ago. I think this is where people make too many static judgments on players, Maniac. The player I was critiquing IGLing was like in fucking like 2019 or something, guys, or 2020 or something like that. Was ages ago now. Like, in the same way as Device has actually thus far sort of blown us all away with becoming an IGL himself and doing a really good job while still fragging. I'll give that same status. Like, even though I didn't think Device could do it, I did say if there's anyone could, it'd be him though, right? He's proven it. He's got so many years of experience. He's a cerebral player. I actually also think the same about NiKo. In fact, I'll even throw in one thing someone mentioned, and I thought actually they've made a fucking great point there, which is I also feel like, for real, if he's the in-game leader, this might sound like some like fucking, what a weird like angle to take, but I'm being serious. I actually think if NiKo's the IGL, he will actually also, in my opinion, be a bit more responsible with sort of his mood, mate. I don't think he's actually as down of when like, because you know when NiKo's the star player, he's probably the most iconic player for like the reaction on camera when he fucking dies, isn't he? Or someone loses the 1v1 or whatever. Even though he's not doing it simple style to like BM you. He's just one of those guys who can't like hide his fucking emotion, you know, it just comes through. I feel like if you make him IGL, he's also going to be more of like a fucking stable figure in that sense, you know, because that's the other thing I was very impressed by, like you referenced. His own game didn't degrade at all. He's still really fucking good. Like, yeah, maybe he wasn't as aggressive because obviously understandably he's trying to call the fucking game as well, but like it actually worked. That's why also, you notice, I didn't at any point in this discussion ever say the stupid thing that a pleb would want me to say of like, you should actually sign Stewie 2K. Like, no. As Maniac just said there, even if we were going to go down this route of like, maybe we should cut Hooxi and make NiKo IGL, it stops there. Like, those are the two moves we do. We then don't go and sign Stewie. Because here's the thing, Stewie 2K, like, when I said he took like 30, he wasn't getting fucking kills. Like, maybe he like fit into like the system well and did things that aided more. At the end of the day, though, like CS is still about shooting people with the guns. And as you say, why would I sign him when I could just sign like some shit hot player who actually can just do that but more, you know, and then be even better, can't we?
I'm right with you, but I do think that it might not be Stewie, because I do think there are plenty of other, let's just say, more up-to-date candidates who maybe are sharper. But I do think that there's something about what Stewie was doing that you might want to find and replicate.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if you really look back and like if you think about the worst moments of NiKo's career, and you think about the numbers and when he's had slumps and all, he's had a little bit of the ZywOo symptom of trying too much. Like, holy shit, was he sometimes trying to put his life on the line and take outrageous duels just because you feel like, holy shit, this team isn't working right now. If I don't find this double entry kill, there's no way we're going to win. So he had a lot of these moments where he would force the issue even in semifinals or grand finals, and he would end up having like a pedestrian stat. Now, what was happening in this G2, this championship winning G2 in Dallas, is that you have, on one hand, you have Stewie, who's willing and more than ready to give his life for any kind of opening duel or any kind of wide swing. And you have Monacy, who's a bit more reserved, a bit more measured, but will find it like 70% of the time or 75% of the time. So now if you're NiKo, you can actually tailor, filter, and choose when you want to make a move, like when you want to call your own number, when you want to try something that you feel like is probably a good thing to do, rather than feeling forced doing it. And I also think the same way I look at ZywOo, when you have players that have this exceptional caliber, you want to give them mid-round. You want to give them mid-round. You want to let them make a difference with the rest of the pack by how they analyze the game and they find a solution to what's happening, and they use the incredible aim just to make sure that they're in the right position. Bam, double kill over. This is where you want to have NiKo. There's no reason to just use him as like a first duel 30% of the time, because we know how hard it is to be an entry in Counter-Strike. Unless you have the perfect flash, the perfect setup and everything, sometimes you're just going to get found. So whatever he was doing, the positions he found himself in, you talk about how he reeled it back in a little bit with entries. Hey, maybe there's something to investigate here. Maybe this is actually where you shine, and where you get some of these like mid-rounds and you get a cool little rotation and you get to be the +1 of a bomb site, or like, I think this is what he should follow. And you can do that if you have someone that is as aggressive as Stewie in that position. That you can do that. So that's what I would like for NiKo if things continue.
I've also got one last angle, which goes like this. There's a concept, right, which is a bit weird, which is in League of Legends, believe it or not, there's been a whole bunch of famous examples of where someone did a role swap and they played, the famous role is they played AD carry, which is the one that like just auto attacks basically. And then a lot of them swap and be the lane partner. They swap to become a support player instead. And the logic as to why some of them become the best is because one, if they actually can figure out the role, support's more of like a cerebral role. Well, because they were AD carry, it's a mechanical role. So you'd have like really good mechanics for what usually is a supportive traditional cerebral role, so you'd have like an advantage there. But more importantly, because I've seen it happen so many times, my theory goes, you sort of know when you were the AD carry what you wanted from your support. Yes. You kind of know how I need to be set up. So the idea is if you can properly process that like paradigm, when you swap over, you could essentially feed and set your AD carry up the best to carry. And actually, this is another reason, which I think is a subtle reason as to why I also would potentially be in favour of trying an equal calling experiment. Because when we talked about those past teams I referred to, a FaZe Clan, where he was like the star player and then he IGL'd because they just didn't have, if you don't know at the time, it's because they simultaneously had too high standards for who can be the IGL, hence why they would just recruit all like legendary players who weren't that good, like a Dread and Neo, and people that were like at the end of their career, and the story goes they were even trying to recruit Exist and Flush. Like the joke, I used to make a joke that it looked like every time they needed an IGL, NiKo and fucking Yanko just pulled up like the HLTV top 20 players for 2016 and just went down from the top. That was my joke. It's a pretty good one, because if you look at like who, you know, or 2017 or whatever, if you go look at who they were recruiting, it's like, what are you doing here? So anyway, when they were doing that, that was the era when NiKo was the best player on his team. So the other problem you have then is you're into blame F territory, which is you don't really want the IGL calling totally around himself, because then, you know, other people are going to get lost. Like what's going to happen to the system, what the structure is. The reason why I think it could be better now is because NiKo isn't even the player he was in FaZe. In FaZe, he was more of like the God lurker. People remember this. Like he was like the guy where like you could see why he was better suited to be a secondary caller, because typically that player isn't with the entry pack. You want them to come and win the clutch at the end. All these reasons as to why it's trickier. Now, NiKo is more of like a fucking aggressive player in CS2 and more latter-day CS2. It's actually what changed when he came to G2. It's one of the things I think he's leveled up in his game. He's a very different player. So first of all, he's got a more applicable role to be IGL. And then the point I was making about the support angle is, I get the feeling for real that NiKo does understand what it's like to be fucking Modesty, because he was that guy. He knows what it's like to be the best player potentially in the world and be hard carrying, but sometimes teammates let you down or they frustrate you or they don't work the right. So I actually think as well, like, they not only have this relationship, but I actually think if there's anyone could understand how to maximize like Monacy's game and help him go to the next level, because there's another thing I immediately think to myself: if NiKo was the IGL, wouldn't you basically be grooming Monacy to just say like, mate, you become a secondary voice in our team? Like if you want agency in the map or something, like, you know, if you have like a play you want to go for in the mid, just let us know. You tell us and we'll make it work. So I also think that aspect could really work, because the reason why it's OP is, you said it earlier, but let's make it explicit. If NiKo became the IGL, first of all, your IGL is going to be extremely skilled compared to almost any other IGL in the game. And then secondly, the player I recruit to replace Hooxi, who then wouldn't be an IGL, bro, we could just have the team that wins the major right there. If you recruit a really skilled player who can do the things we want, like get traded, etc., wouldn't that already be like a major winning team at that point in time? Be a pretty spicy prospect, right? And people have mentioned this. I want to get this as your last take, Maniac. It is alluded, if you look at like not only that weird news about Monacy that came out, like maybe he's going to go to a different team, but like people have pointed out many times, in theory, some of the contracts should be run out soon. I get the sense that even though G2 has never said anything publicly, I don't think this is a project they think is going to run for another year with this lineup. I think they know it's going to blow up at some point, or you're going to make some changes. So what are your thoughts going forwards? Like, do you think they just ride this to the Shanghai major and see what happens there? What do you do? What are your
Honestly, thoughts? I feel like prior to Dallas, there was a consensus about the need for changes in G2. This is the sense that I was getting, right, like the feeling I was having watching them play. And I do wonder if that victory changes that, and like in what kind of way it changes that. Because I think what's happening is we might have gone from fuck this is doomed, like this is at its root, it's absolutely doomed. You know what? Let's just maybe blow it right up and see what's going to happen, to hold on a minute. Maybe we're holding on to something that is incredibly valuable here, and we could probably build around that. I think this might be what was happening, because if you remember, like all that noise, I don't know how much of it was real, but I tend to think that whenever there's smoke, there usually is a fire somewhere. So all that noise around Monacy probably moving,
It can't be nothing there. There's got to be like there had to at least be some sort of thought or conversation,
exactly.
right?
Like there had to be a little bit of some legs to stand on. So now, had that happened in the past, this was over. Like Monacy, or rather G2, and I make the I make the joke here, but Monacy was G2 for a long time, and he was being weighed down and arguably wasted his incredible talent in there. So had he gone, like I think this was it. Like you had to, if you were NiKo at this moment in time, you lose Monacy, you just try and fend for yourself. You say, fuck it, I'm gonna try and find something different. But now, if this tournament is what makes Monacy look at NiKo and think, hold on a minute, there might be something here. Like this wagon right there, I might want to just attach myself to it and keep going. Because I know I like the way you call, I like the way you play. You're basically, it looks like Monacy look at NiKo like he's an absolute role model in life in Counter-Strike, which fair enough as well. Why wouldn't he? So if NiKo had just managed to make sure Monacy just stays with him, now, of course, you can just improve. I think Hunter topic is a complicated one because he obviously struggled in the last few months. I don't think there's an argument to be made against that. He had a few like banger games, incredible moments. The start of Nuke against Vitality is a good example. Like his T side is fucking monumental. He's got 13, 14 frags. He's the one that basically puts G2 in a commanding position, moving on to the second half. So like big game players. He kind of, I don't know if it's like a rain syndrome in phase where if there's a moment you start thinking, would it be time to upgrade? Would it be time to upgrade? Bam, he just hits you with like that big game in playoff, and you just think, oh shit, like this is invaluable. Like maybe we can't really remove him. So let's just extend him the courtesy. Then right behind, if all you want to do is find stronger anchors, then obviously the minus Hooxi plus someone would be obvious. You can probably even start a conversation about Nexa. Like, are we gonna like pretend and stand here like if you look at the stats, they're so top heavy for G2 in Dallas. Of course. They're so top heavy. It's incredible. Like the variance, like the standard deviation from winning the team is so incredible. You could probably ask yourself the question too. But I do think that the Hunter NiKo Monacy, if this is actually a pattern that can work at NiKo as an IGL, you don't touch it. Like you hold on to it for dear life until the end of Counter-Strike if you can, and then you try upgrade the rest.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.